Hello, everyone. Let's get started. I would like to thank you all for taking out time to attend this webinar on cloud compliance, challenges, and how to address them. Your speakers today are Sabah. He's the co-founder and chief technology officer at CoreStack. Has been a cloud technologist for many years and has supported several enterprises with the cloud strategy. Hello, Sabah. Welcome to the session.
Hello, Abid. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be in this webinar.
Excellent. And myself, Abid, I head marketing at CoreStack. Before we get started, Sava, can you please confirm if you're able to hear me okay and are able to see the screen?
Yes, Abid, I do.
Very nice. To set the agenda for today's session, our key objective for this short 30-minute discussion will be to talk about the key topics around IT compliance with a special focus on cloud. The challenges, the best practices, role of technology, and what enterprises are actually doing to manage compliance. And this includes the good and the bad. If you like to ask a question, feel free to do so by typing it in the Q&A panel, and we'll be more than happy to address them. Okay, Sava, so let's get started. And the first question we have for you today is, would love to hear from you, what does compliance actually mean to IT in any enterprise and why they should really care about it?
Sure, Abid. All medium to large enterprises run their business using IT applications now. IT applications are becoming an integral part of enterprise business in today's world. These IT applications are hosted in their own data center or hosted in a data center service provider environment or already transformed to cloud. If IT is integral part of the business, it is important that both IT infrastructure and applications follow certain standards and guidelines, because all the critical information about the business are managed by the application. Say, for example, in financial industry, if it is a payment application, it handles the credit card. If it is a healthcare application, it handles the patient record. These are all very critical information. So compliance in IT means conforming to a rule or standards or guidelines or regulatory requirements, and it varies based on region and industry. To sum it up, compliance in IT is largely driven by two major things. One is a regulatory requirement. The second is standards provided by accrediting organizations. Government enforcements with legislative acts come under regulatory requirements. Examples are GDPR, HIPAA, SOX, FISMA, FedRAMP. These are all regulatory requirements. It needs to be followed by the enterprises based on the region in which they operate. Standards provided by accrediting organization. Examples are ISO, PCI DSS, CIS, NIST, CSA. Organization choose depending upon the industry, they can select what they want to follow. For payment industry, if they are persisting credit card information, PCI is mandatory. For healthcare industry, regulatory compliance, HIPAA is mandatory. So depending upon the organization policy, organization choose what are the accrediting organization that they want to follow. Either they can follow CIS or NIST, it's up to them. But regulatory is mandatory for organizations, depending upon the industry. In IT, the gaps identified under regulatory requirements and compliance controls forms the risk. Say, for example, if the IT is not encrypting the data, if they're not doing the patch management, if they're not managing vulnerability, then they are open for security attacks. So that becomes a risk. So having a plan to continuously assess them and meeting the requirements become compliance. So I repeat, the gaps identified under regulatory requirements and compliance forms the risk. Having a plan to continuously assess them and meeting the requirements become compliance. Governing the entire activity is called governance. So who is going to do what, at what times the operations are going to happen, what is the workflow. So all these things come under governance. So hope this answers what compliance means to IT. To give answers for what is the impact of not following a compliance, I will give you a few examples. If it is a healthcare industry, if they are violating HIPAA regulations, the fine can range from $100 to $50,000 per violations, with a maximum penalty of 1.5 million per year for each violation. To give a recent example, US-based healthcare company Cottage Health had to pay $3 million for HIPAA violation in Feb 2019, just recently. There are one more company which paid up to 3 million in March 2019 as well. To give an example on PCI violations, for PCI violations, fines ranging from $5,000 to $100,000. PCI is not a regulatory compliance, but it is accrediting standard. The fine issued by the PCI are small in comparison to credit monitoring fees, lawsuits, actions by state, etc., etc. For example, Target had a massive breach of credit card data last year. The total cost of the breach was over $200 million, which includes close to 19 million legal settlements for state attorneys. Hope that gives the indication of impacts of non-compliance, and that hope it gives the overall view of what IT compliance is all about.
Great, Savak. It does indicate why people need to really care about it. To sum up your insightful answer, what we understand is most of the organizations are undergoing transformation, and this change is primarily driven by technology. And so, for a business to be compliant, the underlying technology has to be so, be it applications, database, infrastructure, and hence, IT has a significant role to play. Great. So let's move to the next question. Uh, Here, what we like to understand from you is how has compliance been managed traditionally? What kinds of processes, tools, and systems have been used? And what were the common challenges where IT managers and the IT teams really struggle with?
Sure, Abed. Typically, enterprises have a separate compliance department which defines the compliance framework. It defines the regulatory or accrediting standard to be followed. It also defines the assessment method and its governance. The three pillars of compliance organization are architecture, implementation, and effectiveness. So what are all the items that they are going to follow, how it is being implemented, how effective the defined architecture is. So assessment happens for processes as well as the technical aspects of IT infrastructure and applications. So there are various operational and security tools used by the respective IT team to meet the standards. Operational tools includes monitoring the application performance management, log management, backup, deployment, etc., etc. And similarly, security tools includes vulnerability assessment, intrusion reduction system, intrusion prevention system, data leak prevention, file integrity management. There are various security tools available in the market, and security operations team select the kind of tools that they want to use to manage all the security operations as per the defined standards. There are few organizations which use GRC tools or compliance management application for managing the compliance, which get feed from various operational and security tools used within the organization. That becomes an umbrella solution it gives a compliance posture of the IT infrastructure and application being consumed by the enterprise. The typical challenges with respect to managing compliance are the frequency of the audit. HIPAA audits happen every month, and the vulnerability assessments, the dynamics of vulnerability assessment, and applying the patch for the identified vulnerability, and the impact of patch on the applications and the infrastructure. So that becomes a challenging part. So identifying is one challenge, and remediating the identified violation becomes the second part of it. The third part is, after applying the remediation, what is the impact that it has on the infrastructure and the application that the customers consume, is the third part of it. That's where the challenges are.
Okay.
Hope that answers the question a bit.
Yeah, it does, Sabha. Thank you. Now here comes my favorite question. With the advent of cloud, how things have changed, especially when everyone recognizes that cloud is a fundamental component to fulfill their digital ambitions, and hybrid and multi-cloud adoption is rapidly rising.
Yeah. Coming to the cloud world, in traditional world, the assets are mostly physical and fixed. In cloud, assets are dynamic and virtual. And one more thing is, cloud is not limited to infrastructure. Cloud has been evolving very fast. Apart from IaaS, cloud provides a number of services like object storage as a service, file storage as a service, DNS as a service, database as a service, container as a service, now serverless frameworks, machine learning as a service. There are a lot of PaaS and SaaS services keep evolving. So cloud brings a lot of dynamics to the compliance aspect. Cloud provides agility to onboard new assets. Cloud is scalable. So depending upon the workload, cloud automatically scales. So there needs to be a process and tools in place to ensure continuous compliance. So the manual process are little more complex and difficult to manage in cloud world. Cloud service providers provide a set of governance tools and framework. The leading service providers like AWS and Azure comply to most of the standards offered by the accrediting organization, but they comply only from a provider perspective. When the consumer consumes the resources, there are certain list of responsibility that consumers need to manage to maintain compliance for their enterprises. So that's up to the consumer. So there is a clear distinction between what is the responsibility of service provider and what is the responsibility of consumer. So ISO provides a clear differentiation. ISO 27017 clearly differentiate what are the responsibility for service provider and what are the responsibility for consumers. And every controls accrediting list, we can actually differentiate what is the responsibility of provider and the consumer. Traditional tool may not support the dynamics of cloud. So whatever tool that we talked about in the previous question may not meet the needs of cloud dynamics. Enterprise need to adopt a new set of tools which handle compliance for various services offered by cloud. Automation is the key in managing compliance in the cloud world. That too, with the multi-cloud, it is becoming more complex. Automation is the key. Cloud service providers, though they provide a list of governance services, in AWS they provide AWS Inspector, AWS Config for policy management, Security Hub, Guard Duty, Shield. These are all some of the services offered by AWS for managing security and compliance. Similarly, Azure provides a set of services like Azure Security Center, Azure Policy, Azure Information Protection, Azure Sentinel for log management. These are all services offered by Azure for managing security and compliance. But when enterprises adopting multi or hybrid cloud, it takes a lot of efforts for them to learn all these new services, maintain automation for various services that they consume across these clouds, and having a single pane of glass on where the compliance posture for the multi-cloud workload is. There is a learning curve for adopting to these new tools and learning curve for maintaining automation for these services. So it increases the complexity basically for the customers. And we also see that cloud consumers manage more than one account or more than one subscription in Azure or multiple subscription in Azure. So applying the set of rules across these accounts or across the subscription is another challenge we see we see with our customers. So to sum up, basically compliance on a multi-cloud environment is better achieved by adopting to a tool which uses the cloud native features to offer the required compliance. To give you examples of some of the recent implementation that we have done for a large multinational organization, CoStack, a multi-cloud governance platform, is being implemented for some of the leading organization. A European pharma company uses CoStack to manage continuous compliance for its GXP needs. GXP is a specific need for pharma industry. And similarly, a leading financial company in Asia maintains PCI DSS compliance using CoStack. CoStack leverages the cloud native services and provides a compliance across the cloud, across the accounts, and across regions. Hope that answers your question a bit.
Yeah, it does. And that's very interesting. So, Sabah, for me, the couple of key takeaways from what you have mentioned for this question are: one, automation is the key in the world of cloud. And the second one is most likely the traditional processes, tools, and importantly, the mindset that needs a renovation to manage compliance and the overall governance in the cloud and the multi-cloud world. Do you agree with me, Sabah, on this?
Absolutely, absolutely, Abid.
Great. I have a related question because we're talking about cloud and multi-cloud. Do we need to use a different tool and a workflow mechanism to manage compliance for each of the different cloud service providers, or can it be done all from a single platform?
Each of these providers, so basically in AWS provides set of tools to manage security for the resources consumed within AWS. Similarly, Azure provides a set of tools which actually provides a mechanism to manage compliance or security within Azure. So if we have to have a single pane of glass to manage compliance across AWS or Azure, across a private cloud and public cloud, we need to go for a third-party tool, which provides compliance across multi-cloud environment.
Okay, so it means that there's a solution for this, and I'm sure it's a big relief for all the teams who manage compliance and security, because multi-cloud is becoming a normal and an important component of digital transformation. Perfect. So let's move to the next question, Sabah. And this talks about the industry and government regulations, which are constantly evolving and becoming stringent. Example, HIPAA, GDPR, and PCI. Can you please throw some light on how is this impacting the compliance management?
Sure, Abed. The HIPAA and GDPR are regulatory requirements. And similarly, we see a lot of new standards coming up for cloud. CIS for AWS was released in March. CIS for Azure was released in March. ISO 27017, just very specific to cloud, was released last year. So there are a lot of standards evolving for cloud, while there are industry or regulatory requirements like HIPAA and GDPR. So in terms of impacts, I see two challenges. One, how these regulatory requirements are applied for new cloud services. Say, for example, we are talking about Lambda, serverless architecture. We are talking about containers. Mapping your HIPAA requirement to your serverless or a database as a service is really difficult. And similarly, how new requirements, say for example, HIPAA or PCI comes up with some additional requirements, how this additional requirement is applied across a set of services that we are already consuming, and what are all the services which are impacted by the services. These are all the two challenges the enterprise compliance organization face. They need to define a process to implement the changes. They need to identify what are all the ways that they can assess and apply these requirements across these new services. So whenever your new services are adopted, organization need to have a mechanism to define a continuous autonomous compliance check for the services that they consume.
Okay. So what I understand from the brief that you have given is that the compliance needs get very complex and most likely very close to a tipping point where technology driven compliance management will be critical for enterprises.
Absolutely, absolutely, Abhay. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Sabha. Now, moving on to the last question for today's session, which is possibly all the audience would be interested to know about because you have been in the cloud world for many years. Is there any best practice that you suggest to manage compliance more proactively and strategically so that people will be placed with great competitive advantage?
Sure. The first thing that comes to my mind is compliance need to be proactive instead of reactive. So most of the traditional world, okay, I do the audit, and for audit I need to do all these things. I think that mindset has to change. Continuous compliance is the key. So proactive instead of reactive is the key to manage compliance in a cloud world. The second part is basically uh, there are various standards which are available um, with respect to industry, with respect to the regulatory requirements and all that. CIS released a standard for AWS and Azure. So enterprises using cloud need to adopt to these standards irrespective of the industry to reduce security risk. Because these standards provide a very detailed technical information for managing security. The other aspect is cloud security posture management. In traditional world, we don't really bother about the posture, but in cloud, there are a lot of attributes that we configure for every services. And cloud security posture management is a new area which is very critical. Enterprises need to adopt a tool which continuously enforce or audit security postures for the resources that they consume. Example, uh, any S3 buckets that they use, even a small misconfiguration in the S3 bucket, it can actually lead to a potential security leak of data. That happened with one of the leading bank in the past. The other best practices are follow the AWS well-architected framework. These are all basically prevention. While you architect the application, follow AWS well-architected framework, follow Azure governance scaffold. Enterprises can leverage cloud native security tools for managing the security and compliance. And all of these are only the guidelines. And I see adopting a tool that provides the ability to manage compliance for multiple cloud, multiple account, multiple subscription using a cloud native framework is the way to go.
Nice. Sabha, while I was reviewing my notes, one interesting point that you mentioned in the session today was continuous compliance. And I know that Core Stack provides this mechanism to continuously monitor the compliance posture so that you can detect the defects or the gaps and fix them before they convert into a business threat. Can you throw more light on how this is achieved?
Sure, Abed. Can you make me a presenter? I will share a few slides. I will keep it very short. Post-Act has a converged policy framework. All the compliance standards like HIPAA, ISO, or CIS, we have onboarded all these various controls and standards, and how these various controls and standards applies to various cloud services. This is one of the challenges that we talked about during the question and answer. HIPAA provides a list of controls in a very generic way. How these controls are transformed to a container, how these controls need to be applied to a database as a service, or how this control need to be applied to storage as a service or object storage is a typical problem. So core stack solves the problem. Basically, it provides a control and then provides a mechanism to map a policy to various services through a converged policy catalog. Core stack leverages the native policy framework like AWS config, Azure policy, and Core stack also has a data log based policy engine, which provides which actually maintains the compliance in a dynamic way. Whenever there are new changes or new resources provisioned in the cloud, using an event-driven mechanism, it captures the resource, checks whether the resources are meeting the definitions that are defined in the controls. And it gives the consolidated compliance dashboard across the cloud, across the multiple accounts that the customer uses. And Core stack basically solves this problem proactively using native services. In terms of Azure, it uses native services. It uses Azure governance scaffold and Azure native services for proactively applying all the configuration required for services. And then the policy, which basically deducts any violation that happens. So one is the proactive way of enforcing certain things and then checking the audit. So this is the way Core stack helps in solving the compliance problem. And similarly for AWS, it follows AWS native services to provide governance. And it provides a dashboard which actually provides a compliance posture across the account, across the cloud, and across regions. And these are all some of the list of controls that can be added and that can be mapped to your policy and scheduled to get the compliance. Hope that answers your question a bit.
Yeah, it does, Sabha. Thank you. And this also brings to the end of the session. It was a very informative session, Sabha. Thank you for sharing your expertise. If there is anything which any one of you would like to know more and was not covered in this session, please write to us and we shall work with you one-on-one to help you manage your compliance and the world of cloud and multi-cloud better. Bye everyone and have a great day. Bye, Sabha.
Thank you, Abed. Thanks everyone.